Hey everyone, this is Tom, and this week's character is Illyria Nailo for Anna. I was excited to do this one, mostly because I've seen Anna participating for quite some time, and having somebody that's been around for a long time like this win is just kind of fun. It's like seeing a friend win something. It's just kind of cool. So I was really happy to finally get around to doing this character for her. I think she's mentioned her in a couple posts, but. Yeah, it's just cool to finally get around to it. Anyway, so Illyria is a half-elf. A lot of half-elves in D&D. But yeah, so she's a half-elf, lawful good monk. Still pretty young, pretty small. She follows the way of the shadow. And I'll get into more of that sort of detail stuff as we go, but... as usual, I like to start off with just going through the write-up that I get from the winners. It's usually a document that ends up being between 3 and 5 pages. It includes stats and history and personality and physical description. And I just condense it down into, like, I take it all and I put it into a Google Doc, and then I just sort of trim it and consolidate it so it fits onto one page. And then when I have that and I've gone through it multiple times, then when I start this piece, I make sure that I consolidate it even further and put the notes at the top of the page, just as like a constant reference. I think not that who said it means anything, but I think it was Einstein who said that if you can't explain something in your own words, you don't really understand it. Whether he said it or not, I think it's really true. And I like that, and being able to take a long, often highly narrated description of a character, and being able to kind of sum them up in your own words can kind of help lock them into your brain a bit more. And as I've said multiple times in these videos, the more you know the character, the better it's going to go for you, and the better the end result is going to be. There's no character without story. There's no character without a description, without a story or personality or a background. Then it's all just superficial fluff, just stuff being made to make it look cool. And I don't think that stuff kind of works for people too much. I mean, there's a lot to be said about something that's just really cool and eye-catching and fun, but when you're doing something for a character, it's just, anything that lasts. Any character that people remember, they've all been well grounded. There's another good thing about sort of the note-taking process I go through. It's something I developed when I was in art school and I was trying to cheat on a major final exam for a really important class. It was one of the couple lecture courses, so there'd be a big lecture hall, and then you get the written assignment and essays and stuff. One of those terrible classes. And I was always a terrible student, so I didn't know as much as I should have. So I thought, I got this exam, I'm going to fail it unless I cheat, so I'm going to try to cheat. And so I went through all of the slide presentations and notes that we'd been given by the teacher, which was an immense luxury. But I went through them all and I consolidated them and I summarized them, and I took out all the parts that I thought sounded important or that I remembered going over, and I just summarized them and put them all into one document. So I go into the test and I've got this one sheet of paper printed, and it's in my sketchbook, and I'm ready to grab it and sneak it up, and I'm good at being sneaky. But before the test started, the teacher, Allison, she mentioned that if anybody gets caught cheating, they fail. And, I'd failed once before. I didn't want to get kicked out again. So I bit the bullet, and I was too afraid, and I didn't grab the sheet. But I found that as I went through it, because I had processed the information that extra bit more and sort of weighed things and rated things and organized things in my brain just a few hours before, that I actually retained quite a lot of it, and I did really good on the test, even though I shouldn't have. And that was how I learned the value of making a cheat sheet and then getting rid of it. Actually, that was in the first semester of the last. Anyway, when I did it again, I was scared the next semester because I didn't learn my lesson enough. But this time, I actually just did it and then threw it away. It had just become a study, just a study technique that I had. So anyway, that's where I sort of figured that this would be a good way to start with character design. So anyway, back on track. Like most videos, I like to start off with some sort of pose based on the description of the personality and their class, and picking up sort of any bit of detail and nuance that comes through in the description, and then just trying to put that into this character. So Illyria was discovered on the doorstep of the Temple of Tyr, high in the mountains, when she was just a few weeks old, and she was raised as a monk there. Being a half-elf, she grew to naturally be more interested in the world, and sort of the head honcho at the monastery there felt that she should go out and experience the world. It would be good for her, like spiritually and mentally, and all that good stuff. And so he sent her out, and she's sort of a wide-eyed, eager, fascinated young woman, though naive, and gets tricked by swindlers and trusts everybody too much at first. And there's just sort of naive is sort of a harsh sounding word for it, but she's open and caring and friendly, and she's just a bit too nice for her own good. But she's eager to learn and enjoys that quite a bit. She's a skilled fighter. She fights with her hands, but prefers using a quarterstaff that is taller than her. Not just for fighting, but also for setting off traps, which sort of leans into some of one of the design aspects for it. Now, with being a lot of half-elf characters coming up in these lotteries, there's a lot of different ways that I can sort of push the feature balance between human and elf. Looking at current depictions in like the 5th edition books, there's already kind of a range, and the ears are still quite big. I would usually think of a half-elf's ears would be much more moderate, just a bit more like leaf shaped than like a human ear, but not super far out. But but I think the variety is good. I also went with the kind of sloped up eyes that like the sort of canon high elves typically have. In her description, Anna had mentioned that when she was about 6, she saw a high elf for the first time, and she commented that Illyria was excited to see somebody who looked so much like her. And so with that, I thought I'd sort of stray away from sort of more mundane human half-elf, like what I did with Rayleigh, where he was very heavily just sort of human. But with Illyria, I pushed it more towards the elf direction. So she took more after that sort of parent, just to kind of help with that story. I mean, the ears aren't nearly as long as the stuff I saw in the player's handbook. So I did kind of shy away from that a little bit, but yeah. So that's sort of based on her personality, and also the fact that she's described as being so literally described as being wide-eyed. She was literally described that way, but she's not literally wide-eyed. But I did find it a good opportunity to kind of embiggen her eyes, or enlarge her eyes quite a bit, just to sort of explicitly depict that. But also it kind of helps make her look a bit younger, because she's only around about 20. And it's early 20s to mid-20s is actually kind of hard to depict, because they're adult, but they still look younger than somebody in their 30s. But so I just kind of went ahead with it. So slightly bigger head than normal, and slightly bigger eyes, just bigger open. As far as the body type goes, she is a monk that uses a staff, and she's very skilled at fighting. So I just wanted her musculature to have well, first with her skeletal system, I did give her a bit more of a narrower pelvis than like a human female would have. I think elves, they're typically quite well suited with like a narrower frame overall. Um, but yeah, as far as like her actual like combat skills, she's got high dexterity, and so I just kind of wanted to go for that like yoga body musculature, like lean, just martial artist sort of structure with like squared out shoulders and like her thighs aren't as wide as like somebody who might have more body fat on them, but she is very dedicated and disciplined. She does well as a monk. Yeah, she's described as having pale skin, dark brown hair, blue eyes. She's lawful good. I think I might have mentioned that. 5'8", 115 pounds. So very, very lean. 5'8" is pretty tall. I mean, it's getting into like the tall end on for at least human average female. And then weight 115. On that sort of height, that weight gets stretched pretty thin. So I wanted to make sure she was quite lean. So that's why her thighs are quite straight rather than going out thicker near the top and pointing out because just lower body fat. And of course, larger feet than normal. I started getting a lot more comments from that, especially after the Lyra video where I gave her a double dose of foot enlargement because of her ballerina background. But a lot of people have been asking me about that on Reddit and stuff. And I just draw feet bigger. I think it just looks better, like proportionally, or more interesting. I'm not a foot fetishist. It's not for any weird reasons. It's just I think it's just more interesting of a proportion to me. So at least I'm trying to not get it too big, but it is something I'm aware of. So don't worry about that. I know that the feet are big. I think it works. Maybe I'll start toning it down a bit if it's too much. So yeah, with this pose, I just wanted something. She's naive, innocent, like open and friendly and stuff. So just having open hands, and just sort of like a welcoming, and sort of optimistic kind of look. She doesn't wear armor. She's not really combative, though she's skilled, as far as like martial arts go. But she's really not a mean person at all. Just overall, just friendly. Kind of a little bit bullheaded slightly. She doesn't really know much as far as etiquette goes. She's been locked up in a monastery her whole life, just studying and working away and training and things. So that's something I've actually think is funny that I've noticed in all of these descriptions so far, at least almost all of them, is that there's always mention that the character can rub people the wrong way or doesn't know much as far as etiquette goes. And I think that's sort of a funny particular detail that I never would have thought would show up. I mean, I think a lot of people make their characters in as least restrictive as possible. At least, not, I don't want to say more casual players, but people who aren't so much into the role play as much as just the gameplay. But anyway, I'm finally starting to notice. We're about like 10 or 11 characters in, and I'm starting to notice like fun details and patterns emerging, and that's been going really good. So I've just been blocking in her costume. She's she's under the way of shadows, so she wears dark colors for sneaking around and hiding in shadows, and sort of a stealthy monk, not quite rogue, but I'm not sure exactly what the way of shadow monks do in the dark, but I figure I'd dress her appropriately for it. So her outfit was inspired by Zorro, and like with a bit of a billowy, sort of loose-fitting shirt. I mean, Anna's description does mention she wears loose-fitting, dark loose-fitting kind of martial arts style monk clothing. But I thought having like a nice billowy, at least slightly billowy Zorro shirt mixed with kind of standard ninja / like karate material would be pretty suitable mix. So she's got the baggy shirt, and then she's got sort of like the puffy like MC Hammer ninja pants, and then down her side and on her belly she's got a silkish or a silk sash based like cummerbund sort of thing with two black sort of hip guard things. Probably goes around to the back, which in my mind I was picturing being sort of like the same material that the gis are made out of, the karate uniform, just like that thick kind of towel, something that just holds its shape a bit more. And also for her boots, I gave her sort of standard ninja boots, but for the bottom, for the soles anyway. Well, actually, I'll get around to more particular details as we go. So the temple that she was raised at was the temple of Tyr, and Tyr is sort of a deity, like a god of like justice and balance and like fairness and getting that sort of stuff set up right. So I wanted her outfit to be something that would work as a unisex outfit, but also to sort of based on the fact that she's there as an ambassador for Tyr, and having the balance where it would just be a completely symmetrical outfit. Throughout my career working in games, it started off very much so everything needed to be symmetrical just because of processing power. So like, my first job was Game Boy Advance games, and then the second job was at BioWare working on Dragon Age Origins, and so every suit of armor had to be symmetrical because it was still on, I guess it was Xbox 360 by then, I suppose, 2006, but maybe even, I don't know if it was ported to the original. Anyway, either way, and so ever since then, after that, and onwards, it was asymmetrical stuff. Every character finally got to be asymmetrical, and it was awesome and fun. But in this case, I felt that it would be proper. So everything about her costume, as far as something that was issued to her by the monastery for Tyr, is symmetrical and even. Another also note thing. I didn't want to go like too Eastern monk or too Eastern culture. I kind of wanted to go with a hybrid, so I mean that's another reason why I went with the I brought in this cape kind of based on like monk robes, or at least inspired by that, like Western monk robes, I should say, European, and like kind of that silky kind of piratey Zorro shirt. But also with the belt, I gave her the it's kind of like an obi, like the kimono sort of like high, thick cummerbund sash thing, but on top of that is a European monk style rope belt, and just kind of overlapping just East and West monk stuff, just trying to make some sort of hybrid that reads as a monk, but it's not relying too heavily on either, even though I think the end design does have much more of an Asian feel. It's not really that big a deal. But yeah, so I thought, having the uniform be symmetrical would be a good sort of an artifact of that kind of balance based on being servants of Tyr, representatives of Tyr. That's another thing with the outfit, for sneaking around in the shadows. That big open strip from palm to palm serves another purpose, but sort of to compensate on the other side is the sleeves that cover the back of the hand and the thumb, just kind of for extra darkness stuff, but it also, having the sort of the floppier material helps with things like silhouette disruption, which is why she's got the cape as well. There's some things I've learned over the course of the years of being alive, I guess, about stealthy clothing and things like that. The two main factors that I wanted to make sure that I included was some sort of drapery or piece of cloth that she can use for silhouette disruption, which basically means if you have somebody looking into a darkened room, even though you're dressed darkly too, the outline of a human body or a humanoid figure stands out immediately. The human eye sees motion first, and that includes, that's largely based on silhouettes. So the human eye and brain are going to be processing silhouettes first. So if you can have some sort of extra piece of fabric that you can like drape over a shoulder or swing over your head or your legs or cover half your body, it sort of helps keep you from just being detected accidentally by just a wandering eye. So having that kind of billowy stuff present kind of helps, especially if you have a character that's symmetrical with their costume. Having that one piece that can be variable is going to be important. And the other thing, I know that like Anna did describe her wearing dark loose material, but I did push it quite dark, quite near black, but it might not be light enough. But either way, if you're ever going to be doing sneaking around in night, whether you're doing like urban exploration or something, the other thing that I learned is that you should wear medium to dark gray rather than black. The reason why is because black will stand out against like concrete walls or trees or bushes because it's still darker than that material. But if you have something that's like a medium to dark gray, it's still quite dark and will fade in quite well, but it can still get darker. So like shadows can still be cast on it, and it can sort of like just darken in with backgrounds well. So that's why I didn't make her too dark. I mean, there's also the factor that you don't want to lose all that detail just on one like character, because if they're all black, then really you're going to miss out everything. So I mean, there's multiple reasons why it's sort of a route to take. But yeah, with those two things in mind, it's kind of why she's shaped the way she is. So I'm putting in this frame again. It's one habit that I'm kind of happy that it's shown up. I don't know where I got this idea or when I first did it. It is tedious. I wish I could like outsource it or just like hire like a neighbor kid to do it or something for like $10, but just because it's pretty boring and really annoying when you need to do it around like fur or hair or something. But it just helps with keeping the silhouette of the character really neat. I don't need to worry about keeping the silhouette or the edges of her forms or any character's forms from being too messy or sloppy. I can just sort of paint with reckless abandon, and keeping like clothes and skin and stuff separate is enough of a hassle. So if I can just keep the entire perimeter of the figure clean, then that helps. Another benefit too is that on sort of darker characters, I can take that white frame and invert it quickly to black, and that'll help me look into like darker details. And I do that quite a lot with Illyria because she is dressed quite darkly. So like I've said in multiple videos before, I really don't have a set like locked in process. I don't have like an A then B then C kind of thing. It's something that I'm kind of hoping to develop as I go through these. I'm sort of narrowing it down. There's a lot of stuff that I've already picked up and improved on and gotten faster with, and sort of an order that kind of helps. But I hope you don't mind that crunching. If you can hear that crunching, that's just my cat. He just came in. I share my office or my computer room with him. So he just comes in and starts crunching every once in a while. So I'm sorry about that, but I just don't have the heart to get rid of him. Yeah, so I've been getting faster and sort of narrowing down some more bit of a process. But this is one that I wanted to play with a bit more, was doing a layer on top of the colors that's just sort of an occlusion layer. I've got mixed feelings about this approach because there aren't many circumstances where using black is the right choice as far as a shadow goes. Not just straight black. I mean, if you're going to be rendering anything it's just super rare that something would just go straight to black. That's why I kind of colorized it to a bit of a brown. It just didn't feel right going straight down to black. But it is kind of nice having all the occlusion done on one layer on top of everything. It's another way to sort of break up the rendering, or like sort of organize it, structure it a bit more, keep it a bit more flexible. So if I wanted to like change the color of her skin, I can just go to the layer that has her skin color on it and then just tweak that, and the rendering stays the same. So I wouldn't have to, if I needed to do a paint over, I wouldn't have to repaint the whole thing. I could just change the occlusion. So occlusion is just sort of a fancy term for rendering where like occlusion, or if something's occluded, it's kind of like occult. It's like it's something that's hidden, something that's sort of not getting seen. So occlusion is where photons just aren't getting, they're not getting to as much. So like things like nostrils and the wrinkles are in the deep part of her eyelid and inside her ear, like that's where there's really not going to be very many photons bouncing back out, because there's way less going in because of all the different angles and depths and shelves, and so that's what occlusion means. It's basically where there's just not many photons bouncing off into your eye from. But the look that this gives, to me, it can until I'm used to it, I think it's always going to look a bit like a recolored photo, and those always just look so horrible to me. I think it's just because if it's just the one color over the whole skin, it makes it look quite dead. So that's why I do come back later on with some pink, and sort of liven up the flesh again a bit. But I mean, it's definitely part of a pipeline that could really work. I definitely need way more practice with it, but I think it's going to be beneficial. I'm definitely going to keep working at it, but it's kind of nice and it works. So also as far as costume design goes, her haircut, I thought like she is loyal, she is faithful, she is diligent and disciplined, and she's totally on board with the whole tear thing. So I wanted to give her kind of like just like a monkish hairdo, just sort of like her monastery's version of the pate, the monk's pate, where they did the like a big chunk of their hair got shaved off. I've actually found I need to check my sources again or anything, but I found out that, at least I heard that like the monk pate that we've all seen, where it's like the friar with the brown robe and he's got the bald spot on top of his head. Apparently that was done that way because it looks stupid. I mean, it's not like it looked okay back then or not weird. It was like people actually did think it was sort of a goofy, dumb looking thing. It was sort of a humility kind of thing. Like they're not vain. It kind of helps put them in that mindset, I guess. So I thought, it's kind of cool. I mean, I always thought they looked really dumb, but knowing that there's that sort of reason to it is actually pretty cool. So I thought I'd give her like a big chunk of her hair just shaved off as sort of like, this is part of her life, part of her culture. So why not? So she does have long hair. It goes down to about the middle, her lower back. Anna did describe that she does often wear it up, and for somebody who's in a combative role, and especially somebody who's on call now because of her story, she's at least a temporary member of the city guard of the city of Dross. So she needs to be ready. She needs to be on call for combat. So I thought, long hair would have been cool, but we'll tie it up for now, just like a tight kind of samurai type braid, just looped up. But the whole front half of her head is shaved. It's just something to look kind of monkish. So the opening on her shirt that goes across the chest, she's got, basically the idea behind it is she has a tattoo, and this is something that I designed with all the monks in mind that they would have when I thought it'd be cool if they all had this tattoo where like being delegates or ambassadors of this god of fairness and right judgment and judgment and all that stuff, and balance, that they would be sort of like a really trustworthy person, someone who they could settle a dispute, they could barter a fair trade, they could just be like the perfect middleman for people, because they're trying to embody that fairness, that equality, or that evenness and truth. And so the idea for the tattoo was like, you've got Tyr like above their heart, not literally, like it's just sort of the center of their chest, the center of their being, and Tyr's arms are going off down their arms and ending with Tyr's hands over their hands. So it's sort of like an obvious sort of out in the open, like you can hold me to trying to embody Tyr and upholding what this like kind of virtue is. And so it's like if you give them like the copper coins or the sheaven stuk of wheat, and it's up to them to sort of find out what's fair or equal or even, that it's in Tyr's hands, it's not their hands, and you can sort of hold them accountable to it. So it's just sort of a symbol of like their commitment, and like you can really, they take this seriously and they're really going to do a good job. So that's the idea behind the chest tattoo. And I wanted it to be not just like hands on the hands, and then she's got normal sleeves, and then you can see the tattoo up there. I wanted it to be one big unbroken chain, sort of like like the dealer at poker, like they're showing, like they're showing their sleeves, they're like rolling up their sleeves. They're not hiding anything. This is just completely out in the open. So that's up with that design. I was a bit worried that, like, for a while that it was going to look kind of like cleavagey and sort of just kind of tacky and like dumb like that. But I did want this to be something that you'd see a man wearing as well. Like, it's not like, it is open at her chest, but that's just because that's where the heart is. That's where the tattoo would be on anybody who would be representing Tyr. So that's why it doesn't dip down too much. It doesn't go to a point. It's just sort of more like a technical kind of opening. And then as far as the collar, it's just a big open collar that just flares out, and it's like a t-shirt basically. So yeah, I just really didn't want it to look like anything BDSM-ish or anything, because that sort of stuff's just really tacky. Yeah, but I think it worked out. I'm actually really happy with their design. It is fun to, fabric drapery is a huge challenge. It's one of the things that I sort of like to avoid drawing the most, but it was a really nice chance to get better, and it was a nice break from armor. That kind of stuff is fun. Like when you get to play as a D&D character, but they don't wear armor, or you get to draw it. It's a nice change of pace, and you gotta try to think of ways to make them look combat ready, rather than just putting them in a tin can and saying, "All right, I'm good." So in this case for her, it's just, she's a monk, she's a way of shadow. If she did things right, she wouldn't even be seen. She doesn't need armor, she doesn't need too much as far as extra equipment or anything goes. Now as far as her shoes, this is kind of, they're based primarily on ninja boots, but I thought as far as a good way to go about more stealthy stuff, I thought having some fur on the bottoms of the feet, on like for the soles of her boots, would be pretty cool. Just for muffling sound. It's sort of based on like big cats, and they've got a lot like bobcats and stuff. Although they're not big, but they've got really big kind of frying pan paws, and they've got a lot of fur between their toes, and it kind of has two really, or I guess three, really good sort of benefits, and one of them is keeps your feet warm, which is obvious and nice, but that's kind of beside the point. The other one is that it muffles their footsteps, which is extremely good for stealthy ambush predators. It also helps with not slipping on ice, with all that extra surface area of the hair. I've often kind of wondered too, is if like like, because I live in Canada and it's really icy even right now, but if you could, and there's a lot of boots that you can get that have like spikes in the bottoms and like different types of rubber that like tarantula rubber that like don't slip as easily and stuff, but I kind of wonder if there'd be some sort of like rubber polymer or something where you could make it almost like fibrous and like sort of weird thing on the bottom of the boot. I think hair, like real hair, would get worn down pretty quickly on concrete, and even rubber. Anyway, well, that's what I think about when I'm walking home after work. I've slipped. I actually haven't slipped once this winter, which is great. Last year I slipped twice. I'm getting better at it. After living in Canada for a few decades, you finally start getting good at walking on ice. Yeah, so here's the tear hand tattoo. The curved fingers are just inspired by like ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, where they have like these these little like bent fingertips. I mean, fingers kind of do have that, but I just trying to make something that a little bit more more cultural, more stylized, and some sort of basic sort of bearded deity figure. Something kind of just Venus of Willendorfy, just simple, pronounced features. Big hands, big arms, big beard, big eyes, and a pointy hat. Gnomish, friendly. Well, his eyes are a bit spooky. No, that's okay. And then just blurring it a little bit. She's had it for a long, long time, so just letting the ink fade slightly, and then dulling the ink down. Tattoos are another place where research is always just going to help. If you're just taking just hard-edged ink and just flopping it down, just drawing it in, if it's too sharp a line, it can sort of mean a few things. Either that it's modern, it was done with modern technology, or it's very brand new tattoos. They start off very sharp. I mean, they don't fade as much as they used to, or at least people with faded tattoos don't show them off as much. But if it was a fresh tattoo, that makes it so you need to have a sharper edge. So if you're having a character that has lots of tattoos, make sure you keep that in mind. Think about like where every single tattoo comes from. Why they have it, what it represents, how it represents it, what style is it in, and how old were they when they got it compared to how old they are now, what did they get first, what did they get last, and that kind of like, even just the haziness can help tell that sort of story. So you got to think about that when putting in a tattoo. You can't just draw what you think is cool, otherwise it's just going to be poop. I was tempted. I felt sort of like I should have a bit more variety of material and like light response on the materials of her outfit, but I decided against it. I do make the shirt slightly more reflective than her other elements. I was thinking, just kind of Zorro-y silkish shirt, but I figured that by now, the monks of the monks of Tyr that are follow the way of the shadow, they'd have had enough of their stuff together to kind of dye everything from the right place, or from the same place. They're sourcing everything in the same spot. I mean, it might be different materials, but they've had enough experience that they can make it all line up. One thing I've learned, like my dad was in the clothing industry, and so I've learned a few like insider bits of info about like suits and stuff. And one thing that I've learned that I never would have thought about is you don't mix blacks. So if you have two different black suits and you can't find the pants of one and the jacket of the other, don't mix them up. You can't wear one black jacket from one suit and black pants from another, because once you get into the sunlight or any sort of light room with light in it, you're really going to see the sort of the color difference of the dye. Like one's going to be a bit more red, one's going to be a bit more green. It's kind of like if you have like a Sharpie marker versus a Crayola marker, like the black one. Like if you take the black Sharpie and the black Crayola, when you're using just that one, yeah, it looks black. but when you put them both side by side, the Sharpie looks red and the Crayola looks green. But anyway, I didn't want to have to make her mix her blacks. So everything's sourced from the same sort of maybe like cluster of little like monk dye shops. Okay, so this is some other stuff. So on her belt here, Anna in her description mentions she had a pouch of darts. I'm sorry, Anna, I kind of betrayed you. I didn't put them in a pouch, but I did put them in sort of a bandolier on her hip for quicker access. I just kind of, every time my mind went to the thought of a pouch of darts, I just pictured like a big bag of nails or screws. And if you've ever tried like putting up drywall or building something and there's like a big bag of screws, it just hurts to put your hands into. It just hurts your fingers, and I just kind of I thought her having darts that were a bit more arranged would be kind of good, and it also helped better with the symmetrical idea that I was going with. A pouch, I didn't want it to be like a fanny pack in the front and middle, and I didn't want to have to hide it in the small of her back where it would be in the middle back there. And so this is just a way for me to have the darts, have them a bit more combat ready, and also symmetrical. Now the thing on the front of her belt is a weigh scale. Something that, figured someone who's representing a deity of balance and justice. It's a suitable symbol. It can just be like an icon, or it could actually be something that, as I was making this and thinking, it's something that like they would actually be like the trusted third party who would tell you if a deal was fair or test if somebody was trying to cheat somebody in the marketplace. And so they would just have these like very well made, like the best. They'd be renowned for having the best scales, because this is what their system is sort of based on. Their lives are based on. So the arrow pointing down would actually be the just sort of a runic T. Which, once this is folded out and held upright, it would be the T of Tyr, sort of overlooking everything. Later on, I do add some weights. They're slightly asymmetrical, but I figured, they need to be in order to have, like, the 5 unit, the 10 unit, the 20 unit, 25, 50, whatever. But she would have the weights as well. So they would have sort of like the international standard, just very well balanced sort of scales. And then the rope belt around the front. At first I had it sort of doubled around like a lark's head knot, but then that was too asymmetrical and it sort of broke all my efforts for making this outfit symmetrical. So I tied it just with the standard sort of kind of like a perfection loop, which is a type of knot which is really symmetrical. And then just down at the bottom, there's just sort of like a knot with a frayed end, just something to help make it look, to retain that sort of monkish kind of look to it. So here's where I'm finally going in and adding some of the pink, sort of the rosiness to the face. It helps a lot with making her look like a living being. This sort of stuff can be overdone. You'll notice it a lot. People do like really, really red noses. And noses, they often have a reddishness to them, but if you overdo it, it can mean a lot of things, like medically. And also, if you're not wielding it right, it's the same thing. If you're ever wielding anything not right, it's going to bite you in the butt. So go sparingly. Look at photos of real people and kind of see how it lines up. How red people's noses really are or aren't. But yeah, it was nice having all the occlusion on sort of its own layer. And even, coming back later and doing some like subsurface scattering would be good, but I felt like I had the skin where I needed it to be by the end of this. So there's just some darts. Sort of inspired by like Kato from the Green Hornet. There's one of that old show with Bruce Lee in it. He was like the sidekick that had these really cool darts. I always thought that was so cool when I was a kid. It's kind of one of the bummier things about like fantasy and fiction and stuff, is that like like, wouldn't it be cool if you really needed a knife all the time, or like you needed darts in your pocket that you could throw, and it was beneficial to be really good at throwing darts? But we just don't live in that world. But I mean, it's for the best that we don't have to worry about like fighting with knives and swords all the time. But yeah, it's just, yeah, it'd be cool. It's still kind of cool stuff. Just needing that sort of stuff would be cool. So yeah, lots of inverting the frame and seeing what's underneath there. And so she, after a series of adventures, her and her party are now pretty much like deputies or like sort of honorary members of the city guard of Dross. Anna mentioned to me that she and her friends are playing sort of a homebrew sort of setup and location. And so the city of Dross, now let me just double check my notes, because in her first chunk that she sent me, she's just sort of mentioned Dross and sort of moved on, but I knew that in order to make this badge any good, I knew that there'd be some sort of juicy details about this city, so she sent me a good description of it, pretty hefty, but I went and just sort of consolidated the notes again. So Dross is surrounded by a storm. They've got a temple to Talos, and they've got 5 major temples, 5 major districts. The Shallows for the poor district, the Highlights, it's the taverns and whorehouses, the temple district, the merchant district, which has everything from markets to large shops, like selling like arcane stuff, like spells, sort of like a Diagon Alley kind of thing. And the Reaches, which is where the rich and the nobility live. So I get into that badge a bit later. But I did want it to be the only thing on her that was asymmetrical. It's sort of like a... I mean, it's probably me just getting meta. But I thought that it would be the one thing that might not, like, break her faith or break her character or anything, but it's like kind of that one new element that really gives her something outside of her previous life to sort of jar her character loose and put her onto more adventures than she normally would. Like, if anything is ever going to sort of compensate, or what's the word, not compensate, just sort of like jeopardize her fairness or sort of the path in life, it's sort of that one new unstable element that could affect her decision making. So I mean, she's excited about it. It's a good thing. Her and her friends are participating in this role as, they want to right the wrongs and defend the people, and they're on call and they're helping, and it's good. But it's that brand new element to her life, and it's not, it's potential for getting into a lot of adventures. So that's why I wanted to make sure that was asymmetrical. So the kneecaps, I felt guilty about how simple the design ended up being. I mean, I was happy with it. It's just, the character comes first. But I thought it could be fantasied up a bit. There could be some visual details. So this would just be like, you got to have knee pads. There's always got to be knee pads. But if you can do an unconventional knee pad or just a subtle knee pad, that's even better. So this is just some reinforced fabric on the knees. I felt that it the piece could actually work quite well with like dust or some scrapes or some worn out fabric stuff, but things that are a bit too specific like that, I don't like to show on these sorts of things, just because if you have that sort of stuff committed to this drawing, it sort of dates the character at one point in their life a bit too much. It just sort of leaves things a bit too specific in sort of their time. So this is just sort of like their outfit. In some cases, a shredded outfit is just sort of part of the character, like mentioning him again, Rayleigh, something that's really beat to crap. It's sort of part of the setup. And, Illyria is going to get dirty. She's going to go on adventures and things are going to get pretty rough, I'm sure. But it's kind of like growing up, having like battle damaged versions of action figures of like characters where they're like, like Terminator 2, like you'd have like the one where like Arnold's all shot to crap and he's got like guts and stuff. And there's just not as many adventures you can have with him like that. You can have a lot of adventures with him looking like normal, because he can still get into gunfights and stuff like that. But then he can also go to the bank, or he can go to the mall and walk around without people freaking out. It's just that kind of thing. So maybe I'm just overthinking it. Maybe I'm just underthinking it. But that's my thought. So here's just some fur. That's sort of just thinking about like bobcats, and it is black. Everything should be black. I think this monastery probably has the money or the patience or the skill to make sure everything's dyed the same. Even though the fur might have started off white or gray or spotted or something, we'll just make it consistent and steady with the rest. I also left the toes open. I should have mentioned that earlier. The toes open were there just for grip. I figured like once I saw the hair sort of there in my mind, I was originally going to have it all be the entire sole of the boot be hair, but I figured even though it'd definitely be slippery and slidey, like once you put your foot down, your foot would roll over the hair and it would just sort of keep going. So I thought having exposed toes for grip would be good. It would help. And somebody who's so dexterous, she could like hold knives and throw darts with her feet, probably. At least I'd hope so. Also, just putting in some... Okay, this is one place where I did put in the dirt. Where, okay, she's walking around barefoot. She's a city guard in the city of Dross. She's going to places called the highlights and the shallows. There's going to be dirt. She's outside all the time. So, it should be indicated a little bit there. So lots of touching up. It's kind of like Sam Nielsen pointed out on his blog once, where the last 20% of a piece takes 80% of the time spent on it. And that's definitely true. Looking back and seeing... actually, let's jump... So yeah, basically the closer you get to getting done, the more time you got to spend getting it done, which is really annoying, but makes sense. So this is the badge. So with the 5 districts, I first took kind of like the canon idea of like the Temple of Talos, but it was just those lightning bolts just look too tacky with this ring. And then I thought, let's try like 5 points to represent the 5 major temples, as well as the 5 districts, and that didn't work out how well it looked in my brain. Another thing too, like I can't, whatever's in my brain, I can't draw that. I don't know an artist who can. So don't worry about not being able to draw what's in your imagination, because I don't think that exists. Anyway, so we got the 5 circles representing the 5 districts, and then these sort of arrows, these radiating sort of beams, represent the 5 temples, and then this central sort of petaled structure that just represents the temple to Talos, like the main kind of show, and then this sort of chewed on edge, sort of indicative of the storm, just a hint, just something vague, something there with some sort of symbolism. I thought would be nice. So it's described as an old rusty badge, so I threw some rust on it, and but I also sort of buffed it up a little bit, because it's something that she's proud of it, she loves having it, so I think she'd sort of buff it up a bit, but it's still a bit rusty and worn out, but some parts are kind of shiny. And then just with the hair is really easy to get into too much, or like overdo. Hair, I think, is one thing that I'm really okay when people just sort of leave it gestural or impressionistic, just like, is the color right, is the main sort of volume and form right, and then just kind of let it go. Especially if it's dark hair, because you're gonna lose a lot of that detail anyway. So don't worry too much about hair. Just focus more on where the light's hitting it and what color that light's gonna be. But hair is another one of those hard things. Hair is actually, when working, I think when I'm working on a lot of fabric stuff, if I don't have good reference for it, I find it helps to think about the sheet of fabric as being a whole bunch of single strands, and so you can take one thread and sort of more easily think about how it would fall over a figure or how it would bunch up, and then that kind of helps build up just like a wire frame of the fabric. Anyway, so this staff, I was thinking about the balance, the evenness, and sort of, but also the judgment part of it. So, because like if you're going to make decisions, or if you're going to be weighing things, you're going to need to come up with a conclusion. So, with the staff, and also based on the idea of her setting off traps, I thought it would be cool to have sort of two ends of judgment. One is an open palm of either like like mercy, forgiveness, or like that sort of thing, sort of more relaxed. And then the other side is like a fist for hitting people, for punching monsters, or just sort of even just like a symbolic, this staff it marks my decision. I can hold it above a crowd, and everybody can see by the end that's held up what the decision in the marketplace has been. And also just the open hand, I thought it'd be nice as something that that's the end that she sort of reaches in and sets traps off with, that Anna had mentioned. But also, yeah, just something like polished. This is another thing that was inspired by the Asian influence, was just like that highly polished, like black wood, something very fancy, something that's sort of like a meaningful symbol or sort of artifact that she was sent off with. I also put the fist downwards because I figured that would be a better walking end than the open hand. The fist would just be more durable. So that's why I put it down at the bottom rather than at the top. So that she was walking with it like a Gandalf sort of staff, that would be the end that was usually on the ground. Although maybe she might not hold it on the ground. She might hold it over her shoulders like a yoke, or just carry it. It's up to her, really. So yeah, shiny metallic blue. Throw some rust on it. I sort of paint in rust kind of like how people in videos of that paint Warhammer figures sort of do it a lot of the time, where they'll put on a wash or a coating and then brush away where it would have been brushed away, where things bumping it and hitting it. I've actually picked up a lot from Warhammer figurine or Warhammer figure painting videos. I recommend Buy Painted, BUY Painted, and just the official Warhammer YouTube channel. The guy who does the painting that's really good there is called Duncan Rhodes. No relation, but we do have the same last name. But yeah, he does a really good job. And just watching, the thing that I like about those is that the end results are often, if the painter is skilled, the end result is very good. Like the materials look like the materials, like the weathering effects are the best part. But it's another one of the reasons why I use such a limited palette, is seeing them accomplish these amazing effects of rusted metal and chipped paint and fabric and how to do stuff. But they're always just using a couple colors, and right out of the box too, just straight out of the tube, just basic colors. And that was always inspiring to me. So yeah, looking at those sort of things, and there's stuff like that can get plopped into this sort of digital stuff. And I sort of realized that her eyebrow was too high this whole time, so I did change it. From a distance she looked a bit like Dobby, and lowering the eyebrow helped a bit. She would look less like Dobby if her eyes weren't as big, and her nose wasn't as long, and her ears weren't as long, and her forehead was smaller. But I don't care. I really like her face and how she looks. I think she looks really cool. Just sort of just a big, sort of just a grin, just a happy, friendly person. Someone who's eager, helpful, and skilled. And that is Illyria Nailo for Anna. I wanted, this is I was so excited to see that she won. It's cool just when somebody that you recognize now. I pay attention to who's participating. There's a lot of names that I remember, a lot of faces I recognize. I wish I could do one for everybody, but I really appreciate you guys coming back and keeping on participating, and I hope so much that you guys win. I am extremely staunchly loyal to the random hashtag selector, so nobody's cheating, nobody's getting a fair shake or an unfair shake, but I love it when you guys win. So anyway, this is for the weekly free character art lottery. Just follow me on Twitter at R&D Fantasy. The lottery's held on Monday. Every week I just draw your D&D characters like this, free of charge, and I just narrate it and upload it, and it's all just for fun, and I really love doing it. So anyway, thanks again. Hope it helped.